Hey everyone, Vince Giordano, Junior at a County Library. Each day I give you a short video where I answer your questions, so ask us anything. Today it's a book review, The Years That Matter Most by Paul Tough, that I just finished reading. This is a really interesting book. It focuses mainly on high school into college and all the parts that come into play with that, everything from teachers to tests and so on. So I'll talk about that. And it really focuses a lot on that whole process over the last 5 or so years, which I feel is very different than what I experienced. I graduated from high school in 2005, and then I went to Shippensburg University and graduated there with a bachelor's in history and education in 2009. And I took the SATs and the ACTs and the GREs and all of them during high school and then college. And they've changed some since then. So it focuses at first on basically, is college worth it? Does college make a difference? Is it necessary? Do you need it anymore to have social mobility? You know, if you come from maybe not, great of means, can you go up the social ladder per se without a college degree? Um, the author believes that college, I think in the end, college is going to help people, but it's definitely not easy or cheap. Um, if you, for example, come from a rich family or a privileged home or community, going to a great university isn't necessarily going to rise you up many, you know, layers or in social mobility terms. But if you come from maybe a poor background and you go to a great college, that's definitely going to help you rise up. So from there, the author looks at then test prep. So all the standardized testing and everything with the SATs and the ACTs and how that those tests don't necessarily gauge if you're ready for college. They gauge how well you can take their tests. And it's grown into a whole industry with money and the two tests fighting with each other to get control. And it's just crazy. So, from there, the author then looks at once a student arrives at a university, what's it like? The author focuses mainly throughout the book on students that are less fortunate. So maybe they come from a poor rural area or an inner city area or maybe a southern, town where the high school isn't that great. And then what does it look like when they maybe get to college? College anywhere between the University of Texas that they talk about or Yale or Princeton. Often students that come from less fortunate backgrounds and go to prestigious elite colleges have a really hard time making that transition. They go from maybe being in homes or transient lifestyles to being in these very elaborate university settings, and they're around fellow students who are talking about their mountain homes or vacationing in Europe. And there was one student who lived in North Carolina in a motel, and the only place that she could study at night was in her bathtub. So, it's a really hard adjustment. And they go into college thinking, hey, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to meet friends, I'm going to, finally take my life to the next level. And that's difficult. And maybe that doesn't even happen for some of them. So they go to the college and try to make that transition. And then there's the money part, obviously. And a lot can come from certain, scholarships, or they talk about the Pell Grant. And the Pell Grant is tricky in that if your family makes a certain income, you're eligible. But if your family makes an income just outside of the threshold, and maybe they still don't make that much, but they're outside of the threshold, they don't qualify for it. And actually, colleges try to make it that way, because if their college accepts a certain amount of Pell Grant students, their ranking on the U.S. World News college ranking goes down, and it means a lot when they have a high ranking. So the ranking system isn't necessarily signifying great things in terms of things for students, but the prestige for the colleges, and then recruiting students. And then they spent a good bit on recruiting itself, on the admissions department and what it takes to admit a student. They don't necessarily just get a whole bunch of applications and then say, okay, I'm going to take these, and then say no to them. It's like it's like a business model now, where they have different programs and algorithms that they use to pick those things and see, will this student most likely succeed, what will they bring to the university, and even now, actually, at least 40 to 50% of the universities, of students at universities, actually don't pay the full tuition. So some universities, they can't count on tuition as necessarily an income. It has to come in other ways. So that just was interesting. And then it went into how actually some universities are moving into a style where they are going test optional, meaning you could take the SATs or the ACTs, but let's say you didn't do very well. Some universities actually let you apply and only include your grade transcript, your high school transcript. You do not have to include your test scores, because it's being found that there are quite a few students who test poorly, but they have really good grades, and they actually end up doing very well in college. Whereas some people, some universities, and even obviously the SAT and ACT people, they believe that that's not true, and that the test scores really say a lot. So then it also goes into a section where it calls or it talks about lower ed. And lower ed is defined as a couple things. Mainly the for-profit college sector, which has really, blossomed over the last 10 to 20 years. And then also some technical schooling, such as, receiving an associate's or a certificate in welding, for example. And those things are tough, because often to succeed, it's very helpful to have either a degree or experience in a field. But if you don't have a degree, then it's difficult to get into the field and have experience, so maybe you're stuck. So often students will, try to get a certificate or some sort of experience from a university in welding, let's say. And it costs money, it takes time, and sometimes when they come out of it, they make just about the same amount of money. So what's the point? Some of them believe that it gives them a little cushion and protection in case there's a downturn, but in that case, it makes it difficult to justify saying, yeah, you must go to college no matter what. Then with the for-profit universities, such as University of Phoenix, or where I grew up, there was DeVry, the amount of students, the number of students in those universities that actually come out and graduate is not that high. And actually, about 44% of them default on their loans. It's not cheap, and it's very challenging. And actually, they don't necessarily per se offer results. They promise results, and there's obviously a big difference with that. So then it kind of wraps up with how some of teachers and professors actually try to get into the mix here and actually try to help students. It talks about a math professor who had been teaching for 50 years and could, be very, elite and choose, very particular classes. But he chooses year after year to teach freshman calculus class. And I feel like with this, I learned a lot about calculus. I can't do calculus, but I learned about it. And this teacher found that a lot of students who went into college and took calculus were not really prepared for it, and they struggled. Even those who took calculus in high school, even took AP calculus, they're not all the same. So they came into college, and calculus in your freshman year of college is basically the gateway to a degree in math, science, or engineering. So you have to pass that. And then you take further, calculus and other math classes. This teacher found that a lot of students would struggle. So what do? Do you try to, work with all of these students, or just say whoever gets it, and that's on you? Well, this teacher took a lot of effort into working with different students, with his teacher assistants, creating study groups, and he actually studied a lot on how different students studied. For example, African American students, the ones in the study felt that they were raised to study on your own and kind of, study an hour for every hour that you're in the classroom. And then they looked at Asian American students who studied in groups and put in a lot of extra time. And then they kind of, and then the Asian American students typically would do better than the African American students. So then they would take those things they learned from that study and help other students to, grow and become a better student. And it actually made a difference, but it still was challenging. They focused on one young girl who was from San Antonio, and she just struggled and tried, and she eventually made it out. But it was not easy, and she got to the point where she just felt defeated and didn't fit in and just thought that she should just go home and give up. But she didn't. And the teacher really tried to figure out how much can I push students to learn and accept new, thinking without totally breaking them and making them give up. And that was challenging. So kind of to wrap up a few things, I just found it really interesting about the way that like the cottage industry of testing, standardized testing, that's just really interesting. And then also some professors tried to figure out how to get students into college, and they thought for a time that students wouldn't apply to college because they just didn't know about, those things. So they thought, hey, maybe the way they know about it is we'll send out packets with information. And it turned out a very small percentage of students actually applied because of the packet. Throughout the book, I thought it was almost depressing how much all of these different students and teachers and professionals tried to make the system better and saw no results from what they tried, or very little results. So it's almost like, what can be done? And I thought on the last page of the book, the author really wrapped things up really well and summed it up really well, our system here in America. Last paragraph of the book. The inequities in the American system of higher education cannot be solved by the government alone. Sure, there are regulations and policies and laws that should be reformed and improved, but in an educational system as decentralized and independent as ours, pressure for change has to come from many directions at once, in individual decisions and collective ones. And what we choose to pay attention to and how to spend our money on and our time means a lot. The levers of change are all around us. We can affect them as students and parents, as educators, and as citizens. We just need to decide which way we want to pull. And they're right. We have so many different universities. We have 50 states with state universities, public schools, and then the online, schools and for profits. It's so decentralized and independent that a president can't just say this is going to happen and here's a program and that's going to fix things. It's just so diverse, and our backgrounds and our income and our lineage, that makes things even more difficult. So I thought this was a great book to read. It was given to me as a gift, so we don't have it at the library, but I found it at Barnes and Noble, or the person found it for me at Barnes and Noble, and I'd recommend reading it. It won't necessarily give you an answer like yes, it's correct to go to college or no, but it really gives you an all-around picture of that whole process these days. So, again, the book, The Years That Matter Most, How College Makes or Breaks Us by Paul Tough. Great book. Check it out. Go find it. And thank you for watching, and ask us anything.